Hey, thanks for stopping by the blog. Today is going to be all about your letters. People have been sending in a lot of wonderful comments and questions to jeffcannata@gmail.com, and I've been reading through those, really enjoying it. I particularly liked a lot of the stuff that people were sending in support of my guilty pleasure, which was professional wrestling we saw a couple of weeks ago. My favorite email comes from Crystal Pedden. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. P-E-D-E-N. Peden? Anyway, she writes, Jeff, I always love every time you mention wrestling because I too have the same guilty pleasure. I'm a 28-year-old professional woman who grew up watching wrestling with my grandfather, dad, and brother. We were always WCW fans as opposed to WWF or WWE, but that doesn't mean we didn't watch the other side from time to time. Like you, I don't watch it the way I did growing up, but I found my love renewed with Netflix instant streaming's offerings of the rise and fall of WCW and documentaries on Bobby Heenan and the Hart family. I love Sting and watched the documentary on him. I love the characters, the theatricality, the athleticism of it. I say all this to say, the wrestling guilty pleasure, you are not alone. I got a lot of messages of a similar vein, and I love the sentiment. I love the idea that all of us, each growing up in a different geographical location with different circumstances, because of pop culture, because of these nerdy little things that we were all excited about, be it a big movie, a small television show, or even professional wrestling, that we can all have this communal experience together and really a shared childhood, which is what I love about doing web content and finding a lot of people who are like me all around the world. When I was growing up, as hard as it is to believe, I thought I was the only one that loved Star Wars. There was nobody around me in my little neighborhood that was as into it as I was. And this global community that the internet has engendered makes all that much more exciting. So that's one of the things I love. Anybody that loves wrestling will appreciate that the next email is from someone named Alex Bischoff. So Alex writes, Hi Jeff, I'm a big fan of TRS and I recall your enthusiastic review of Cougar Town, as well as your blog post along similar lines. I've named Cougar Town as one of my top 10 favorite television shows of 2010. So I rented season 1, disc 1 from Netflix, and the episodes don't seem so good so far. But I know some shows can turn things around after a few episodes, or sometimes take a little while to get their footing. By any chance do you recall approximately when Cougar Town starts getting good? I do love Cougar Town. In fact, the last season finale episode was just this week, and it's hilarious and wonderful. And I wasn't a huge follower of Scrubs, but a lot of people have explained that Scrubs has a very similar sense of humor. So if you like Scrubs, you'll probably like Cougar Town. Now, I can sympathize that season 1 probably doesn't feel as good as I'm making it out to be. I think it took a while for the show to get its footing. In fact, it was launched with Cougar Town, and now the show seems to really be making fun of its own name and has found a completely different voice that doesn't have anything to do with cougars or that South Florida kind of mentality of older women going after younger guys. It's really more about a group of people who are really fun to hang out with, like each other, and are very funny. So I started watching the show at season 2, and I wasn't lost, and it wasn't, didn't have anything that I missed out on in season 1. I ended up going back and watching some of season 1, but I think if you start at season 2, hopefully you'll like the characters as much as I do, and enjoy the show as much as I'm enjoying it, because I think it's really a gem that has a very unfortunate title. The last email I'll talk about today comes from Jason. Jason writes, Hey Jeff, big fan here. I was listening to We Can Confirm the other day, and you brought up something I've been trying to figure out myself for many years. How to create that 15 minutes of fun repeated over and over again in gaming without having to resort to shooting people in the face. Well, at first, I looked at something like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Back to the Future 1. What makes these movies so good? It's not the gunplay, because there's hardly any of that. What makes stories fun is the events that unfold. We get that now with cutscenes in video games, but for the most part, they're just filler. The problem I've run into when thinking of this is, video games are much longer than the average movie. So in Back to the Future, you can have 2 hours of story and feel satisfied. But in gaming, the pacing would not work. If it's 8 hours of story being pushed, the pacing doesn't work. Sure, games like Heavy Rain can do it, but that's what makes it such a unique game. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the length expected in games is a factor that needs to be considered. Opinion? Well, Jason, I don't think it's merely a factor of length. I think that's certainly an issue, but in novels, the stories last much, much longer. Television series, the stories last much, much longer. I'm sure you've had the experience I've had of watching back-to-back-to-back-to-back episodes of a television series and wanting that story to keep going on and on and on. In fact, there's a benefit to that in a lot of cases because you are committed to these characters over a longer period of time. Now, I think that the problem with video game is that the interactivity of it demands you be doing something all the time. Not that you're just passively listening to a story unfold or seeing twists and turns of a narrative, that you are actively engaged in doing something, moment to moment. And you hit on that with your 15 minutes of fun repeated. Now, the easiest thing, of course, is to play a giant game of tag. That's a very accessible, very obvious way for someone to be doing something all the time. Of course, tag in this case is usually shooting people in the face. But I do believe there's another solution to this. I mean, I think Portal and Portal 2 have shown that while it is still a gun mechanic and it's still basically playing tag, the idea of navigating an environment or figuring out one's way through it using these portals is a different kind of 15 minutes of fun repeated. I think there's going to be a whole new paradigm at some point in video games where traversal and shooting are no longer the only ways to tell a story. I think as we move forward and we see more exciting ways for animators to capture what it is to be human, we get past that uncanny valley, and we start interacting with characters in video games in a much more human way instead of a video game kind of way, for lack of a better word. In much more of the way we relate to characters in a novel, where we feel something for them, or we feel something for actors in a film or a television show. I think that's going to open up new doors, and I think something like LA Noire has a lot of hope riding on it. Now, we'll know in very short time whether or not that game lives up to the hope. But I think that is the future of video games, where instead of merely just needing to run through an environment and shoot things through it in order to create that 15 minutes, that there's some new way to be actively engaged, to be doing something moment to moment, be it for 2 hours or 20 hours. And it's still fun, it's still compelling, and it still gives me something moment to moment to be actively engaged in. Thank you all for your letters. I'm really enjoying reading them. If you'd like to send a comment or question, please send it to jeffcannata@gmail.com. Until next time, I'll see you later.